I have a very interesting conversation that is coming up under Tech Talks, also co-presented by Marketers Control Room, not because we have a marketer, but because we're going to talk about strategies that is extremely important from a marketer's point of view today. To that effect, I have a very interesting guest. It is my pleasure right now to be speaking to Mr. Ajit Kumar, the leader of Deloitte Digital in India. And Ajit and I are going to be speaking about, eventually we'll speak about storytelling. But before that, some interesting notions that came up in my conversation with him, some of which I don't agree with, some of which I do agree with. So we're going to leave it up to Ajit over here to see how much he convinces us. So first off, welcome Ajit to this BW Businessworld conversation.
Thank you, Noor. Pleasure being here. Thanks for having me.
Ajit, we were discussing about storytelling, but building on that, and you brought this point up, you spoke about the importance of enhancing human experiences when you were explaining your thoughts on that concept to me. And I thought it'd be very interesting for our audience to understand, how do you define human experiences?
Thank you, Noor. And first off, just some thoughts and wishes to all the viewers. We're going through some crazy times, and I think it's important that everybody had the strength to kind of get through these times. So lots of wishes your way. So on this whole notion, Noor, of human experience that I totally believe in, I'll maybe just start with my own story, right? The story of my life in three big chunks. The first part of it was me as a kid. So a lot of that was really shaped through the stories that I heard from my grandparents, my parents, right? Whether it was the Ramayana, the Mahabharata, or Panchatantra, any of those. So those really shaped kind of my values, if you will. And then fast forward to my schooling and college. So that was when the left part of my brain started getting raked up. A lot of information, a lot of numbers, analytical thinking, all of that. But then if I think back to my school and college days, what I remember is not what I studied. What I remember is all those experiences that I had with my friends, the amount of time that I spent in the sports complex of my college, and all the different experiences that I got as a consequence, right? And then fast forward to work. Again, work is a bundle of left brain stuff, typically, where we do a lot of work with clients. But then if I sit back and think about my couple of decades of experience at work, what comes to mind is that cup of coffee that I had with my client when I had a difference of opinion and I had to get over that, or the tears of joy that we shared when we went on a go live, and some of those crazy escalations that we might have had where it strengthened the bonds. Right. So when we think about all of these different blocks, the common theme here is that we are nothing but a bundle of stories. And those bundle of stories really relate to kind of who we are as people. Right? And so this whole notion of human experience, when we think about it from a brand's marketing perspective, is the key notion that, for you to be memorable, you've got to touch the hearts of people. Right? It's a well-known fact that we don't make decisions based on brains alone. We make decisions based on the heart. And to reach the heart, you've got to get to the core of it. The important thing here is not to look at people as customers or potential customers, but to look at people as people and their fundamental values. And how can you revolve kind of the products and services around the lives of people, which is what we call as human experience. So if you truly touch somebody in a way that you evoke feelings that convert you from being a stranger to a family that you inherently trust and connect to, that's a concept of human experience. The simple equation in my mind is that human experience is way, way greater than customer experience. Right. So if you look at the people that you interact with as humans rather than customers, you have a much better chance of enabling that loyalty and the feeling of connectedness.
Excellent. It's a mindset conversation that you're having, customer versus human. From an industry point of view, we actually understand that there's a difference the moment you use the two words. But Ajit, tell me, right now, it's coming back full circle. Once upon a time, we knew that connecting emotionally was what got the consumer. We wouldn't talk about what was happening in terms of what is the science behind the product. We talked about the aspiration behind the product. Then we went to a world of knowledge. In the world of knowledge, people wanted to know information, so we started becoming more scientific. Now we are again coming back to this entire, bots at one time, or technology had taken precedence in terms of creativity. But now we are coming back to where the idea or the emotion at the core is what matters. One part of it, I believe, is relevant also because of what happened last year. But tell me, if last year we weren't going through what we went through, would we still see this kind of relevance to this conversation right now?
Well, I absolutely think so, Noor. I think this has been happening for a while, so it's not a new thing, like you said. But what's happened in the last year is it's accelerated, right? So just visualize this. When we think about the evolution of human beings, we think ape becoming people. Right. And when we think about the evolution of computing, we think about the big supercomputers becoming, small, smart devices, right, which are way more powerful. Similarly, when we think about marketing, like you rightly said, it's gone from a product to this experience. Now, the transition from the product to the experience brought a customer element in the middle of it, and the customer experience element in the middle of it. And then there was the spurt of data, like you rightly said, which brought a lot of data. But what really enabled this transition is how you look at that data. Sometimes I laugh saying it feels like a business is in conflict with the customer. When you hear the marketing speak, right? I'm going to grab market share. I'm going to capture the mind share of the customer. I'm going to attack them one-on-one. It almost feels like there's a conflict rather than an engagement.
Yes.
And the use of the data, if converted into, what are the aspirations, what are the insecurities going on with people, puts a whole different lens, right? Because just think about it this way. Just over the course of last year, the pandemic has been horrible. But the movement around racial injustice, around gender inequality, all of those are to the fore. Now, why is that happening? Because information spreading at the speed of light, social media, and the variety of different, data access and information access is making people a lot more expressive, way more than ever before, right? And it's forming communities. Before you know it, when something sports out in the US, people in India kind of are like, yeah, we can relate to it. And you form a community. And so what is increasingly happening is that brands that are able to put them in the middle of that whole kind of unjust fight that is going on in people's heads have the opportunity to become a part of somebody's life. Right? You're no longer a brand that is outside. You're a brand that is fighting with me, that stands for the same thing as me, right? And so I connect to a lot more. And so if you put it in that context, what we are seeing now is an acceleration of the same phenomenon that has been happening for a while. But just the enormity of the current situation, right? Which is literally simplifying life for people to a large extent. Because more than ever, I don't know about you, Noor, but I sit at home and think about what's important for me. And it's pretty darn clear what is most important for me in life compared to ever before when I was on the run doing a lot of things. And when that happens, and when you can connect the brand to that same thing, there is a resonance of things that bring the two together, which I think has accelerated the whole phenomenon of focusing on the human experience that I think is very, very important for kind of brands and marketeers to consider.
To understand. Perfect. I get it. So from a concept point of view, I completely get it. Ajit, you're sitting in Deloitte, which also means that you are right in the center of whenever anything new happens. It's a technologically savvy company. It understands new age and modern marketing. So to understand modern everything, actually, including modern marketing. To that effect, why don't you give us like a sense? What are probably some of the things available that marketers can consider if they have to put in mind what you are trying to explain right now as the to-go road? So, what is probably some technology available to them maybe, or anything new in the marketer's arsenal that will make this a stronger way to, I use the word arsenal and I'm thinking about all the aggressive language we're using. So I should not use that. But anything available to the marketers right now that will help them in this kind of storytelling or in this kind of connecting with consumers?
Yeah, and absolutely, a lot of it more. Because I think we spoke a lot about how do you get to know your customer as a human. CRM is at the core of everything, right? So know your customer, have a system that actually understands your customer well, not with the intent of knowing how you're going to transact with them, but with the intent of knowing them as a person. Right. So having CRM at the core is very, very important. Harnessing that data is very important. So analytics, AI, the usual buzzwords. But to me, the most important thing there is not the technology behind it, but the lens that you put on top of it. Like I said, the data around, how can you connect with somebody rather than what's their next best action. That's great from a business perspective. But as a customer, I'm not looking at the business to look at my next best action. I want them to look at, my next best aspiration. So a lot of that. And then I think the other key thing that seems to be happening, which brands and marketeers are using very well, is how do you use certain technology that can evoke communities and help provide assurance to customers. Let me give you an example, right? So some of the paint companies that are doing it right now are using the whole augmented reality experience very, very well. Right? Yeah. So point my phone towards a wall and I'm going to paint that wall. I love how it looks. So now I'm going to share it with all my friends and say, hey, look what I did. And before you know it, you're collecting a bunch of stories, you're collecting a bunch of design concepts, and you're collecting a bunch of people who have common interests that now I know how I can serve well, not with the intention of just connecting to them as a customer, but more to know what is it that they like, right? So this whole notion of, connecting technology with the experience and connecting it with their human values, creating the bonds, and effectively, it's not just storytelling, but kind of story creation, or co-creation of stories that forms these kind of immense bonds that I think brands and marketeers are using very, very well currently in order to make this happen.
All right, perfect. I get it. In fact, you mentioned AR for paint companies and real estate, but OnePlus came up with an excellent campaign during COVID times using AR. And I thought that, I'm agreeing with a lot of what you're saying, that some brands actually get it. Ajit, in the process of our conversation, you also kind of alluded to it a very little bit when we were speaking about it right now, the role of the consumer or the role on the opposite side. So there is storytelling that the brand is also doing, but there's a role that consumer also plays in it. Wasn't that something you were speaking about the last time we were discussing this? Is there something you want to add on that?
Yeah. So let me share a story for that, Noor, which actually brings it to light. It's in the hospitality industry, which arguably is going through a tumultuous period right now, given what's happened. But what they've done, I think, is a source of inspiration and tons of learning for what they did. So as Deloitte, we work with quite a few of them, and one in particular kind of helps explain this concept, right? And this was a company that, like most other hospitality companies, the occupancy was down to about 14%. Most of their hotels were closed, and they were wondering, how do we get back in business, right? So the first thing in their mind is, how do we get our loyal members to come back and stay with us, right? So they started on a four-pronged kind of approach. Right. So one was do good, right? With the purpose connect. The other one was build confidence, right? How do you build the confidence in all those members that are coming back, right? And then the third one, which again was very important, is how do you inspire travel, in general, right? Before they come stay with you, they got to travel and drive recovery. So through those 4 phases, I think the key things that came out, the do good was, how do you help with what's going on in people's lives, right? Everybody was fighting the pandemic. And so the do good part of it was literally to lock arms with them and say, we are here to help. Right? The quarantine hotels, come in here and we're going to help you get better. Right. And this was not with a business sense, but to say we want to help the cause. Right. So there was a lot of do good aspects of it. Then when you think about the build confidence and inspire travel, a lot of it was looking into the customer psyche and saying everybody's worried about, is it safe, right, to come back. So what that transpired was a bunch of storytelling from the brand to say, here are the measures we're taking in order to make sure that the hotels are sanitized. A lot of training of internal people to say, how do you communicate this to customers? How do you sanitize the place very well? And how do you showcase through videos that this is happening? But also very importantly, they rolled out a suite of touchless operations. Right? Which said, you don't have to stop by at a register, you don't have to meet anybody, you just walk into your room and you don't even have to touch your door before you enter the room. Yeah, okay. Completely touchless experience, right? Builds a lot of confidence. And so that was one way in which a lot of storytelling helped in order to reassure the customers. But one big thing that came up during this, Noor, was it wasn't enough just to tell them you're safe in the hotel. The biggest concern in people's head was, how do I even get there? Right. Right. And how do I travel and how can I be safe during travel? And once I come into the hotel, am I going to be stuck in the hotel without meeting anybody, or can I venture out to places around? Now, this is a classic example where the storytelling from the hotel would appear pretty not authentic. Right? Because again, you're trying to sell, come and stay with me. So that was where they tapped into their membership network, the loyalty members that they had. And some of them, came into travel. And what transpired then was to say, share your story. How was your travel experience? How was your stay experience? Did you venture out? What did you see? Post some videos. Right. And very soon you had a bunch of videos which said, here was my experience. It's not as scary as you think. It was actually smooth. And here's all the things I could do when I stayed. So this is a lot of what I call story seeking, which is, you don't put things out there, but you have the customers come in there and share their experiences, which are a lot more reassuring for me as somebody who's contemplating going there to say, hey, somebody like me has gone there and they had a good experience. So let me go consider that. The next thing that happened was even more phenomenal in that a lot of these insights on what people did when they went to stay actually challenged their business model. So far it was more about come in here and stay here, right? But a lot of people that came in are now using it from morning till night. A lot of, just for work. So in this case, this hotel chain came up with new business models, which was no longer just come and stay with us, it was work anywhere. Right? So they came up with the concept of a day pass, which is come in the morning, check out in the afternoon or evening, and you're done. Or it's a stay pass, which is I'm going to work but stay overnight and then get out of there. Or it's a play pass, which is the normal recreation stuff. So this whole story seeking, story sharing actually inspired a potentially new business model for them, which evolved from just nice to be at a hotel to actually coming there to work. Right. So if you put all of these together, right, part of it is me as a brand putting out there to reassure you of things that are in my control. And then there are things that are not in your control, and the best people to share that to reassure you are the other customers. Right? Cool. The other people that come and do that. And then when you bring those two things together, you inspire kind of new ways of working that can be, path for completely different models that businesses could work with. So I thought that would be a good example to share in terms of, how it's important to bring customers into the equation. So it's not just a matter of us telling somebody, but it's a matter of everybody sharing it with each other.
Yeah, Ajit, interestingly, while I'm so much in agreement with you right now, and I love this as an example, but interestingly, this was a point that I was going to disagree very, very vehemently with you on, simply because, I'm not sure if you recall, I'm not even, sure how much of that is prevalent right now, but there was this entire time because of user-generated content, and when YouTube was really picking up, when we were convinced that the power has gone out of the hands of the brand, it is totally with the hands of the consumer. They are making up their own stories and they are talking about the brand in the way they want to, and brand must let go of control and they must allow the consumers to be part of the story if they want to ride the wave. Now this I'm talking about almost 12 years ago, 10 years ago. And then we continued to see the importance of brands. We were even debating at that time, what will creative agencies do when consumers themselves are creating this kind of content? And then we figured out that, because there was so much of cluttered content, there was a place for curated and well-crafted content, which made the role of agencies even more important, or the brands even more important, and brands continue to keep a certain amount of control with them. Now, just to take from your example, build up on the fact that going forward, storytelling needs this kind of redefinition, and it requires this kind of confidence from the brand that it allows its consumers to be part of it. Maybe some advice, Ajit, on how do we keep this conversation going, given the history of this own conversation? How do we keep this going in the time forward, where your vision of what the storytelling can do for a brand actually materializes for that brand?
Yeah. No, I think it's a very intriguing question and an important one. Because I read it somewhere and it completely resonated with me in that if people love your brand so much that they begin to share your stories, yes, your life is made. Right? And so the important thing here is, how do you get to that point where they love you so much that you don't have to worry about relinquishing control, right? And it may sound cliched a little bit, Noor, but the important thing there, I feel, is around how do you tie in with the common purpose? Because when you have the common purpose, everything else falls in place. And I'll again share a story just to reinforce that point, which was with another insurance company that we were working with that was selling insurance for the elderly. And while that was going on really well, there was something that was missing in there, where again, the storytelling was literally in the hands of the insurance company. And then when we poured through a ton of customer data and what the customers were really craving for, there were two things that stood out. One was they were all worried about their physical well-being, their health. They were also worried about their financial well-being, their wealth. And so when the company thought through what was going on in the minds of the people that they were serving and themselves, there was a very good connect where health and wealth were brought together, right? So the purpose of this company was not just about giving insurance, but it was about securing the health and the wealth of the people that they were serving. And so what they did was just embark on a journey to say, how can I help you with your health? So it started a campaign with about, it takes 66 days to create a habit, right? And a bunch of apps which enabled all of these people to now pick up certain things that would make them healthy. And for each one of those instances, there was a counter which said, here's the financial well-being, which is positively impacted as a consequence. Now, at that point in time, they relinquished control to say they were so certain that their purpose around, making sure that there was well-being among people and what people were looking for was in resonance. And then they gave up, right? And then what transpired post that was just all of these people literally going viral on, I'm working out and I'm doing this and I'm exploring outdoors, I'm going into nature, I'm feeling more healthy, I'm feeling more wealthy, which then didn't feel like it was not in control, because it was tied back to a common purpose of connecting health and wealth together for the consumers, which then did not leave any fear in their head of giving up that control, but being sure that the brand narrative and the brand purpose, in resonance with what the people's purpose was one and the same, and then it just makes it even more powerful.
You got it. You have the right purpose and everything else follows. That makes perfect sense. You spoke about
Absolutely.
right now. So I'm pretty much going to end with this question, in fact, which is around narratives, or rather what we're seeing right now about story ideas. There are really two ways to look at it. Now, what example that you have given us right now, it allowed the brand to have a longer narrative, multiple stories, which was deep rooted into its purpose, which connected back to people. But many times, Ajit, we see that brands fear that surely because about consumer boredom or their receding attention span, they want to have a new idea, something quirkier every single time, and they want to make that jump really fast. Or there is feedback like, but this story idea or this brand campaign idea of yours was from last year. So how do you see it? When we talk about longer term narratives, is it important for a brand to constantly keep hitting a new idea, or to have an idea that can be shown in different ways? Really, what is the best way to approach this?
I think my view on that, Noor, is be very outside in focused for you to change that narrative, right? Rather than inside out. Because coming up with new ideas is great, right? But you got to ask yourself the question, why am I coming up with that new idea? Like I said earlier, in the case of the hospitality example, was that new idea triggered from an untapped need that I saw in the market, because of which I picked up on that idea and changed something quickly? Because those ones have the ability to really click and take off, right? But if it's new idea for new idea's sake, not to say it's going to fail, but there's got to be a bigger intent to it, to say what was it that triggered that need for a new idea. And sometimes it could really take off. Sometimes it has the risk of, it was a very insight driven, somebody's pet project that I said I want to do something, in which case it creates a dissonance, because now you have a captive audience that is resonant with your thought, and suddenly you come up with something and like, what are you doing? Right? And so it does take, in my opinion, an outside in perspective that can get validated. And if you're inspired by something that is going on in the external world that says, if I just do this additional thing, it's really going to help my business, absolutely go for it. If it is something that is based purely inside out, without taking the customer and the human that you're serving into confidence, there's always the risk that there's a 50-50 chance that it might succeed or fail.
Perfect. You actually have given the perfect line to end this conversation, which is bringing back to the human focus or the human experience, whether it is when it comes to your brand narrative, your brand purpose, your storytelling, or the fact that consumers can in fact play an important role when it also comes to alluding to business insights or things that can affect business models, especially in the times that we are in. From that perspective, Ajit, you've answered everything I wanted to ask. I'm very grateful for your time. And I'm hopeful that the next time when you and I are speaking, we have already spoken about the next level or a more modern marketer storytelling in the perspective you have defined it.
Absolutely, Noor. Pleasure talking to you as always. You take care. Stay safe. Thanks for having me again.